there are two kinds of anxieties. Like, I'm giving this for context. One is like the constant one that keeps going on and that is the main part of you. And one is like that rises up in tense and stressful situations. And the second part is with me. Like, anxiety is in a constant with me. Like it's not like a constant friend who just stays by my side or something like my shadow. It's not like my shadow. So yeah, it's like this monster that is within me, but it only wakes up when it sees an opportunity. I felt like I was living kind of void. Like, life didn't matter anymore. Anyone in my family or anyone close to me can drop dead tomorrow. Like, there was this sense of mortality that was shattered once again. Like, it was first shattered when Nanu died, but it was shattered even more intensity after my mother died. So I was completely barren from the inside. Whatever personality made me was completely gone. Okay, especially for like the first 2 weeks after her death.
Hello, and welcome to Life's Tapestry, a podcast where we talk about the experiences that shape us, ordinary or extraordinary. I'm your host, Mohammad Haris, and I'm joined by my co host, Rija Alam. Hello, Rija.
Hello, Haris. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm also doing great. It's very hot in Pakistan right now, so
It's
I guess we're
definitely
both.
very hot.
I guess we both are just melting away, and yeah.
So, this is our second episode, and you want to talk a little about our guest before we start talking to him?
Yes, of course, of course. So today we'll be inviting Kulsoom over. Kulsoom is a person that I hold very near and dear to my heart, and we were basically childhood best friends. And growing up, we saw a lot of phases that we both went through and all of that. So we've shared a lot of that history together, and I'm really excited to have her on this podcast. She will be talking about grief and also like a bit about, you know, uh, being the eldest and the eldest sister syndrome and all of that and how that has impacted the person she is today. So I'm really excited to dive into this one. I hope you are too, Haris.
Yes, I am definitely. Let's talk to her.
Uh, Hi, Ume.
Hi, Ja. How are you?
I'm really good. We were just talking about how hot it is these days. We're literally melting.
Yeah, literally. I'm just like wishing for rain these past couple of days. Like, rain, and it changes the weather and everything. I'm just praying for that.
I know, I know. I think rain is expected though. Rain is expected. I
Yeah,
think
Yeah,
things will
first,
get better.
yeah, and it's all the telltale signs are here that rain will happen. Really.
Hmm. Yeah. So I just wanted to like really thank you for coming and saying yes to being on the podcast. I know that the type of things that we were wanting to talk about would not be easy to talk about for anyone, and it's just something that I feel that I'm really proud of you for, making it to a point where you're not only being able to talk about it, but also, you know you're coaching someone else through it as well currently. So that's just amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, of course, it is very difficult. It's still very difficult for me to even think about this stuff. But since, I always like feel like talking about this stuff is always it always acts like therapy for people, especially for people like me who are emotionally vulnerable and who rely on their emotions more than they rely on their thinking capacity. So I believe like talking about it is catharsis, and that's not the only reason why I agreed to talk to you about this on your podcast. It was also because I really wanted to support your podcast, and I think it's a amazing venture that you two have started, because the main premise of it is very encouraging for people like me and people who are going through different kind of problems in their life. So I think that it creates a voice for them. So thank
Yeah,
you for
thank you.
this.
Yeah, for sure. That was the main thing that we had in mind. For context, for our viewers, I just want to give them some context. Umme lost her mother recently, and she's been grieving for the past few months, and that is something that we'll be covering. But to start slow and to start with something like really basic, can you tell us about your childhood, where you grew up, and all the things that were around you that actually shaped you into the person you are today?
Well, that's a very good question, and of course, it's an introductory question. Well, I grew up in Karachi, which I'm still living in to this day. I grew up in a very, very healthy household, mashallah. Say, my parents were very loving, and they're still very loving. And I am the eldest of five siblings, and my childhood was shaped by all of these. Like, there was to my personality, there were two kinds of things. One, the who always wanted to have fun, be adventurous, and just go out and do all the things that people my age did at that time in my childhood. And the other one was the imaginative part of me that who ventured forward into reading books and imagining stuff and being delusional. So yeah, you can say that I was delusional since I was a kid. So I guess these kind of things, like these two parts of me, they happened because of my childhood. And my childhood was like my parents were literally the best parents I could have ever asked for. They gave me all kinds of freedom. They never restricted me doing anything they wanted. They just knew that the upbringing they wanted to give their children should be based on, you know, shaping them into a morally good person. And that's what they did. But otherwise, like उसके अलावा तो like जो भी आप करना चाहते हो, whatever, they gave freedom to your passions or to whatever. Like the
Yeah.
minute my dad found out that I like reading, so he once, like when I think when I turned 10, he surprised me with 15 books, and I was like, Kulsum, ये सारी की सारी बुक तुम पढ़ोगी, तो ये तुम्हारे लिए लाई हूँ. And I was like so happy कि आपको कैसे पता चला कि मुझे रीडिंग का शौक हो गया और सब कुछ. तो मैंने कहा तुम्हारी टीचर्स बताती हैं और सब बताती हैं, and मुझे नजर आता है हर चीज. So like, you know my parents being this observant of my passions or pursuing season. So I believe that's what shaped me into a very imaginative and a very that kind of person who thinks that following my passion is should be the main premise of my life, and which I'm still doing today
Yeah.
because I graduated in English literature. Uh, उसके अलावा, I think
Continue, continue.
it's okay. So my childhood, yeah, was basically this and a healthy household and support. And being the eldest was, of course, troublesome because eldest daughter, especially because eldest daughter, have a lot of responsibility, not just of their siblings, but also of their parents. Because I think, in my opinion, Rija, you're also the eldest daughter. I think eldest daughters have to grow up faster than
I
girls who
swear
are
they do. They do. They
right.
like the moment you were telling me about, like, you were just talking about how you had two parts of yourself. I honestly thought
Yeah,
that the first part, after the first part, you'll say, oh, like, I wanted to be like this crazy kid who's always doing the things that other people are doing, like putting this energy out in the world and everything. I honestly thought that when you'll say, and the second part of me was this responsible kid who wanted to, who needed to, not wanted to, needed to be there for their siblings, and like be there for all
exactly.
the things, like even for the parents at some point, like, okay, matlab my mom is going through something, so I should really be there
Uh,
to support her and all that.
exactly.
Then this expectation comes with being the eldest, especially being the eldest daughter. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I agree. Like, matlab, my mother saw a best friend in me. Like, even though I was like very young or whatever, but she always confided in me, and that kind of thing like made me like it was of course a burden. Like, eldest daughters have burdens of all kinds. Like siblings, who besides the parent who brings the siblings, it's of course the eldest child, right? And उसके अलावा like parents का trauma and whatever they faced in their life, and उसके लिए सारी जो emotional support, like my mother especially who wanted, she projected on me, and I was very grateful that she did because I projected my emotion support. I saw her as my emotion support. So I believe like since I was a little kid, I always had this what can you say, like this kind of duty to be as responsible as I could, but also grow into someone that I wanted to grow into and what my parents wanted me to grow into. Which, mashallah, say they've succeeded, and I pray that I keep following their and accepting, conforming to their expectations. Uh, so yeah, this was basically my childhood. Any more questions about like further?
Of course, of course.
Uh,
So,
and
so yes,
if you want to talk about my school life, everyone's school life is like full of ups and downs. I think the most dramatic period of one's life is school life. Don't Wouldn't you agree, Rija?
for sure, it
Like,
is so dramatic. Everything means so much more. You're like so dramatic about
yeah,
everything. It,
every the drama in every nook and cranny and toxic people, bullies. Oh my God. For
for
context,
sure.
Rija and I became best friends when we were 11 years old, and we've been best friends ever since. And we met in school, and oh my God,
Mashallah,
the drama.
mashallah.
Like bullies facing bullies. But what I love about us, Rija, is that even though there was, so many rumors about us spreading or whatever, all the negativity and everything, but despite all that, we stuck together like glue. That's what I love about us.
Yeah, we even had teachers going after us. Like, who does that,
Yeah.
man?
Oh,
But yeah, aren't they adults? Like, bro, leave kids alone.
Yeah, I don't even know, man. I don't even know. So, yeah, so just going to come back to like, what we were discussing. So
Yeah.
there's this thing called the birth order theory. So the birth
Hmm.
order theory, it suggests that the position you have in your family hierarchy, like the order in which you are born, it influences the personality and relationships that you have, and it also shapes up the kind of person you grow up to be and the kind of relationships you have as an adult as well. So for instance, firstborns are usually considered to be more responsible, and as an adult also be more responsible and make good financial decisions, while later
Yeah.
borns are sometimes considered to be rebellious or maybe even more social than their firstborn siblings. So, have you
Yeah.
noticed any such patterns or dynamic related to birth order in your own family?
Yeah, 100%. Like, was always an introvert, and I always believe that maybe it's because I love reading books or whatever. But my siblings are two of my siblings are literally the biggest extroverts I've ever known in my life. And I
you're
sometimes
just
wonder how are
you're
they
just
my
telling my
siblings?
life
Like, I'm
story right now.
literally the biggest introvert. So yeah, this bird order theory that you're talking about. I know, right? Like it's so common nowadays. So the birth order theory we were talking about, yeah, I believe that's the main reason why we turned out this way, me and my siblings. Like since I was the eldest, I always had to, listen to all of these emotional problems going on in our family, or whatever stress my parents were feeling, or whatever issues my siblings had. I was the listener to all of them, and coping with all of their emotions and giving them life advices or whatever. I think that shaped me into the kind of person who was more reliant on her emotions, but also couldn't express herself as well. Like she developed social anxiety because of it. Like all these things coped up inside, and I think that developed severe social anxiety inside of me. Even now when I'm working and I've graduated, but even now, even if I go in crowd or public, I will not talk to anyone unless someone speaks to me first. So yeah, I think this is literally the theory is 100% right. Uh, my siblings, for example, I have my younger sister Amara. She's like 5 years younger than me. She's so extroverted, like she can go out and talk to anyone she likes, if stranger ho ya na ho, but she can start talking. And I sometimes marvel, like, how do you do that? So, thinking back to this theory and connecting it to my experiences, I believe that it's because she didn't face all the kind of trauma and burden that I did, because I was forced to grow up fast since I'm the eldest. But since she's the third one in our sibling group, so she didn't get as much trauma. She was always, her life was completely separate from all of these things, so she could grow into someone like, separate from all of these things. Because if, in my opinion, and I guess it also matters on people's personality. Like my personality was always the introverted type, but hers is extroverted because, that once again what I'm saying is, okay, because of her role and because of her duties. But of course, things are changing because since after our mother's loss, a lot of responsibility was also laden on her, and if she's also being forced to grow up faster than normal girls her age would. But this only makes me prouder of my siblings that they're growing mature and more mature by age. So yeah.
For sure, for sure. So some studies that also suggest that if you are the eldest sibling, okay, sure, matlab, eldest sibling is one thing, but being the eldest daughter actually makes you more prone to the birth order theory. And a few people even described or linked a few traits that link up to being the eldest daughter, and it's called the eldest daughter syndrome online. And it's like you have an intense feeling of responsibility, you're often an overachiever, you're very driven, you may worry a lot or have anxiety, or you struggle with
Yeah.
people pleasing behaviors, or even have hard time setting boundaries. Now I, as a eldest daughter, I feel like I can relate with a lot of this stuff for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how it differs based on like gender, but what I can assume is that society, as from a societal point of view, women or like female people or girls, they're expected to have way more responsible, expected to have like, they just basically have a lot of expectations resting on their shoulders. And when a girl or is a younger girl is playing along and going around and doing whatever he or she, like, she wants to do, then people will probably be like, oh, maybe you shouldn't be, like, help your mother, like, why aren't you doing that, or why aren't you doing this? And there are like certain
Yeah.
things that are linked up. Yeah. But I would like to have a comment from Haris maybe on this, because he grew up as an eldest son. So is it, how much does he relate to the eldest daughter syndrome? Because I know Kulsoom and I do relate a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely relate to it, like so much of it. I guess the only difference is that you are right. Daughters are put under even more pressure. So many, like for a boy, I mean, there's a lot of expectations, obviously, but at the same time, you're also given a lot of more freedom, just because of the way our society is. And I think for girls, it's also like, oh, you are also supposed to help us out at home and do the chores and do this and do the cooking and all that. So I guess that's also like adds a lot more pressure on women than men.
Yeah, for sure. And just to add on to what you said just now, Ume, uh, I actually feel like, like sometimes when your mom confides in you and actually, treats you as her best friend, it can actually, matlab, it's a good thing, of course. You get to have like, oh, my mom is my best friend type vibe. But sometimes you end up hating the same people that she hates. And like sometimes, and they could be, family members, and it just creates this weird kind of dissonance. Like, you're supposed to just be a kid around them, right? But you secretly kind of hate them and stuff like that. So I feel like there are a lot of complications from, like, if you end up discussing, oh, like what kind of things our eldest daughter is expected to be doing and stuff like that. So what are the biggest challenges that you faced growing up in the role of the eldest daughter?
Uh, yeah, what you've said, all of this stuff about, like, that my mother is my best friend, that's a good thing. But of course, it's also a burden because, and putting that aside for a minute, for your question, my answer would be that these societal expectations that, people put on girls, I believe that eldest daughters are receive the most of these burdens. Don't you think? Like younger sisters and younger daughters are kind of exempted from these expectations because when people look at a family, the eldest daughter is the one who crosses everyone's eyes in the first place, right? Younger sisters are always the second priority, but the first, what can I say? The public image that of your family is your mother and then you as the eldest daughter. So yeah, I believe the biggest challenges I faced was, first of all, you know, if I'm being honest, I never viewed my mother confiding in me as a challenge, because I always, it was the thing that I always ended up hating the people she hated and she had a problem with. But that's because in my mind, my mother was always right. And of course she was, because the kind of personality she had, she was liked by almost virtually everyone that she met and she had in her life. So, it's like toxic people exist in this life. They still exist. They're still in my life, and I have struggled creating boundaries between them and distancing myself from them. But in my little head, in my childhood, like whenever my mom confided in me or whatever, I always thought that she has a good reason for hating these kind of people, and that's why I always like viewed this not as a challenge but as a lesson, that you will always meet all kinds of people in your life. And my biggest flaw in me, that my mother and my father and my siblings are always pinpointing, is that I'm too nice. I cannot say no. I'm like, that term used, people pleaser. Yeah, I'm a huge people pleaser. Okay, I feel sorry for toxic people even if they've hurt me. So my mother was
Same.
so yeah, so this is a huge flaw that I'm still trying to correct. And my mother, like whenever she shared her emotional story or her emotional, weaknesses or whatever, the main premise of her, or the main lesson that she was trying to teach me, was always the fact that there are all kind of people in your life, and there's a way to deal with every one of them. And through her stories and through her lessons, she was teaching me that I need to be, the one to create boundaries with these kind of people. They don't deserve my niceness. They don't deserve me being fierce, pitying them or feeling sorry for them. So I always thought that this wasn't a challenge for me, like my mother being my best friend and me being her best friend. So, but on the other hand, the challenges that I thought that were very problematic were these expectations, grooming myself and looking beautiful, or knowing how to cook, cleaning the house or whatever. My parents never, they are not the kind of people who, the traditional minded people who think that the main duties of every daughter is to know how to do house chores. Because that, in my opinion, in the 21st century and in the modern world where women are working and educating themselves and becoming, what they worth, what their worth is. So I believe, like, having this kind of traditional mindset, it always, is very closeted. And I'm very grateful to God that my parents are not like this. Okay. But however, my parents aren't the only people in this world. There is a huge society out there to see expectations to meet karna hai in order to be accepted for some reason. There's this, I'm going a bit off topic, but I'm sure both of you have heard of Franz Kafka's famous novel, Metamorphosis. So, have you heard of it?
Yes, yes. You are the one who educate me on these things, and I have definitely heard of it. Thanks to you.
Yeah.
Oh, what is it?
So,
I'm sorry, I missed it.
Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis. It's a short novella. I'm
Oh
sure
no,
you've
I
heard of it.
haven't.
You haven't? Oh, it's okay. Fine. I'll
I've
just
heard
give you.
about it, but I haven't read it. No.
I'll give you a little context. It's about a guy a normal guy. He's a salesman, and one day he wakes up and finds himself to be a huge cockroach. He has turned into a huge cockroach. So, and the minute his family sees that he has turned into a huge cockroach, they try to kill him. Like, they treat him like a cockroach. They don't think that he's Gregor Samsa, their son, who was earning for them or whatever. They just see him as a cockroach. And this is a huge commentary on social expectations. Like, people put, especially on eldest siblings. That guy, Gregor Samsa, he's the eldest son. So he has the most responsibility in the family. And this is the same thing that I believe is can also be applied to my life, especially. I'm not speaking for everyone because everyone's families are different, but my family was different. So yeah, so keeping my parents are like the exact opposite of Gregor Samsa's parents in Metamorphosis. But despite that, I relate to Gregor Samsa because even like like मैं थोड़ा सा भी expectations से अगर दूर हो जाऊं, like I enjoy books more than I enjoy clothes, या फिर I don't like shopping, या फिर I hate mehendi or whatever, for my own personal reasons. People are always like, oh my God, how can you do that? How can you do that? Like, that's like, and if I mess up even a one dish, and people, they have many comments on that. They don't think it, this is a human being trying to learn. If this is a, an eldest daughter who has already has so much, on her plate and she's still trying to meet your expectations, they don't show sympathy. They just see you as a cockroach, going back to
Mm,
metamorphosis. So yeah,
I
so this is
guess,
what I'm saying.
um, I mean, it's not just parents putting pressure on you, not even
That,
just pressure, or just say it's not just parents that have like so many expectations from you. It's also
hmm.
the society in general. So
Yeah, that's what I'm.
exactly. So like with all these expectations and with all these responsibilities, it's not a surprise that many eldest daughters also have to deal with a lot of anxiety. And this is the next topic we want to actually discuss with you. So can you share a bit about what anxiety feels like for you daily?
Oh my God, you just mentioned my greatest enemy. So, to be honest, I never had intense anxiety in my life before my grandmother died. You see, my grandmother's death was the first closed person death that I've ever experienced in my, in my grown age. Like my dada, my dadi, they all died when I was very young, even before I was born. But my nanu, when she died, so I was more than like older than a teenager, and that death it kind of shattered a sense of mortality that I never had. Like when people, your close ones are alive and well around you, you always think, well, you don't think about death that much. You think they will. There's this illusion in your head that they will live forever. या फिर कुछ इस तरह की चीज एक delusion होती है आपके दिमाग में, and that delusion was rooted in my brain. But the minute my nanu died, I, in the entire emotional balance that I had in my mind, it turned upside down and it introduced intensified anxiety in my head. I always had social anxiety, but this kind of anxiety was very different. Like, if I haven't went to a therapist or anything, but I can diagnose myself because I love to search up my symptoms. So, what Google says is that I have general anxiety disorder, which is also called GAD in short. Anxiety is literally the worst thing, in my opinion, I that can a person like me, especially an eldest daughter, can experience. But it's so that's why it's very sad that an eldest daughter, or eldest son, life is like that. That anxiety becomes a common thing for them, and I think it's very sad, especially in today's society. And for your question, like what anxiety feels like, it's horrible. Okay, one word that I would say that it's horrible, and you know, there are two kinds of anxieties. Like I'm giving this for context. One is like the constant one that keeps going on and that is the main part of you. And one is like that rises up in tense and stressful situations. And the second part is with me. Like anxiety is in a constant with me. Like it's not like a constant friend who just stays by my side or something like my shadow. It's not like my shadow. So yeah, it's like this monster that is within me, but it only wakes up when it sees an opportunity. Like, just for example, if I give you an example, when a deadline is approaching, I used to work as a freelance writer a couple of years before, and there was this one task that had a deadline, and I was just like 20 minutes away from that deadline, and my anxiety woke up like a light bulb. And it feels like my hands start twitching. I cannot think straight. I cannot focus on anything. Especially, I can't focus on the work. I grow rude. I'm sorry, I'm stumbling on my words. I started treating people rudely for no reason at all, and I cannot. I believe like I'm in a void. I'm not in a like in the place that I was before. I'm in a void, and people simply don't exist, and people who care about me simply don't exist. The only thing that is important is this deadline, and I have to focus on it. So I completely go unhinged when anxiety hits. So,
I can
and
relate with you so much right now. And even Risha
yeah,
would know this. Yeah, so if I have to be somewhere, let's say like in a 10-20 minutes, and if I feel like I'm getting late or something, so all the people around me, if there are like 10 people there, I'm going with a group of 10 people, everyone is okay except me. And I'm just, like uh, even being rude to everyone, like, oh, why are you not moving? What are you doing? So I think I can definitely relate with this.
yeah, 100%. And I believe like since you're the eldest son, right? So in my opinion, this is more common with people I've seen around me and whatever. I believe this is more common in the eldest child, like of a family, because they have so much family responsibilities, cooked up inside them or whatever. And especially for me, because after my mother died, everyone's societal expectations that were laid on my mother, they transferred indirectly to me. Like when my mother died, everyone, I'm legit telling you, 95% of the elder women were telling me, कुलसुम, now तुम्हें सब कुछ संभालना है, तुम अपने बहनों बहन भाइयों को संभालना है, तुम अपने बाबा को संभालना है, you have to be the strong one for them, you have to bear this responsibility, you have to be the pillar for your family now. And I was like saying, yes, yes, you're right, and I was listening to them, but in reality, in my opinion, the strongest one are my siblings, and I'm not. So, once again, these are societal expectations that they put on as the eldest sibling. And because of these societal expectations and these duties, anxiety grows, in a snap. And it is literally the worst thing in my like. I think I'm trying to control it, and mashallah say I have controlled it a lot. Like I try to grow heavy on it, and I don't let it overwhelm me. But it's very impossible. Like it just happened recently, like in my work, like currently, there was, it mostly happens with deadlines. I don't know why. So there was this deadline approaching once again, and I was working, and my best friend in my office, my colleague, she sat down next to me and she was like, Kulsum, are you okay? Because she could see my face. I was growing paler by the minute, and it's and I very rudely told her off, and I said, yaar, dafa ho jao, please. Right? And उस वक्त it's like I didn't even realize who I was saying this to. I didn't even realize कि मेरे बराबर में कौन बैठा हुआ है, क्या हो रहा है, कुछ नहीं हो रहा. And I just started working. ठीक है. And I even pushed my other friend, like trying to complete my work. I was trying to get to my seat, my desk, and my friend, she looked at me in concern and she was like, Kulsum, are you okay? And I literally pushed her aside to get to my desk, and I didn't even respond. And सबसे बड़ी चीज ये है कि like I didn't even realize how rude I was being. Like this is what anxiety makes me. And then the next day, both of my friends were not talking to me, and I was like surprised. मैंने कहा कि इनको थोड़ा अंडरस्टैंडिंग होना चाहिए कि मुझे एंग्जाइटी हो गई थी, एंड दे नो अबाउट माई एंग्जाइटी. सही है. तो मुझे एंग्जाइटी हो गई थी, तो ये मुझसे बात क्यों नहीं करे. फिर मैंने उनसे जाके पूछा कि व्हाट्स द प्रॉब्लम विद यू और सना, यू नो हाउ आई गेट और सब कुछ. तो माय फ्रेंड सेड कि कुलसुम, डू यू इवन नो हाउ रूड यू वर, एंड कितना जोर से तुमने बोला था कि सबने सुन लिया था इधर उधर, और बोले थे कितनी बदतमीजी कर रही है, और मुझे बहुत बुरा फील हुआ. तो उसने he explained to me कि I forgive you, of course it's your thing, it's your emotional problem, but you should also control it. Like you shouldn't go out of control and let it control you. Don't let anxiety control you, because after all it's an emotion inside your head. The Inside Out 2 that just came out, and anxiety is a new emotion. So I believe she is the one
Uh,
controlling my, and she's the main emotion
yeah,
that.
I just wanted to say, please
Yeah.
don't give any spoilers.
No, no, I haven't.
Oh no.
I haven't watched it yet. I only watched the trailer, and I know, okay, she's gonna be a very prime emotion in that movie. So I'm just giving an example that she's controlling my console, and my friend said that you shouldn't let her control you. You are the one who is in charge here, and you should control her, and keep an eye on your surroundings. से कौन बैठा हुआ है इधर उधर, तो थोड़ा दिमाग में फोकस रखो, रूड ना हो. Okay, I understand कि तुम्हारी डेडलाइन रीच करनी हो, whatever, but don't let anxiety control you. And this is
Hmm.
something that I believe I'm still learning. I still haven't overcome it yet. So yeah, in my opinion, anxiety is literally
I
my biggest pain.
Yeah, I think anxiety. What I can feel when I'm feeling anxious in such situation is, uh, yeah, people will tell you to, control your anxiety, but anxiety is your, response, or is your way, to try to control everything around you actually. So I'm glad you talked about this. Like how sometimes you're rude to people even when you are having that anxiety attack. And
Yeah.
also one other important thing you talked about, I'm glad you did that. Especially if someone's mom like passed away, so there is this expectations from society that, and there's always like a constant expectation from the society that as an eldest sister, or even if someone's dad died, so the expectation from the eldest son is always, oh, you have to act like a there for everyone now, like provide for everyone, protect everyone. So I'm very glad you talked about these two things. But one other thing I would like you to talk about um, is what are some of the strategies or some of the coping mechanism that you have yourself found helpful in managing your anxiety over the time?
Yeah, okay. That's a very good question because, in my opinion, like dealing with anxiety has been a very tough challenge. But Allah ka shukar hai, I have found a lot, a couple of coping mechanisms that, make me feel more control of my situation when I'm anxious. The first are people around me, the people who support me, the people who love me. They're my friends and family. Whenever I get into fits of anxiety attacks, my sisters or my friends are always there to support me. And like I'm the kind of person who needs, this is people who have OCD. Like I don't have OCD, but I'm just giving an example. Like people who have OCDs have the habit of asking question after question. So ये ठीक लग रहा है, ये ठीक है, ये ठीक है. They keep asking for validation. Like because they need assurance. कि they need assurance कि ये ठीक है या नहीं है. Like if imagine like for example that I'm writing a piece and I like almost everyone around me has said that my writing is beautiful. Like write excellent stories, but I always have this thing in my head that nahi, I'm not that good, yeah, but I'm not that skilled or whatever. And my friends and family are allowing नहीं नहीं बार बार assurance देते रहते हैं. तो इसी तरह anxious situations में भी they are the kind of people जो यहाँ इस तरह के people हैं, supportive people, even Rija herself included. Rija भी इसमें है. So she's like, and she and everyone else or Sana, तो जब ये लोग assurances दे रहे होते हैं and they are there to tell me that it will be okay and you are in the control of the situation and they're reminding me again and again, Kulsum, you can control this, you can do this. Don't let, anxious thoughts and questions that are arising in your head control you. So this is a huge coping mechanism that helps me control my anxiety in the way I want to control. And उसके अलावा I believe talking to myself in my head is a coping mechanism. I know it sounds very weird, but since I'm the kind of person, like for context, I would say that I am an INFP. Okay, my MBTI type is an INFP, and INFP people are like those kind of people who live inside their head. They have a very imaginative mind. Like I've said, I already said I'm very imaginative. So imaginative mind in the sense that I assure myself in my head day by day कि कुलसुम ये जो तुम्हें thoughts आ रही है ना, they are deluded thoughts, they are anxious thoughts, and they aren't the thought that should be mulling over and over again, and you should just brush them aside and focus on the important thing and be in control of it. So talking to myself and not talking to myself out loud, like talking to myself mentally. So these are the coping mechanisms that I believe are huge. And in my opinion, reading about characters who have anxiety similar to mine is also very therapeutic. I don't know if it's the same for every reader out there, but for me it is. Like, for example, if I give you an example of a character, have you any of you read The Help by Kathleen something? I think her name is
Yeah.
Kathleen. Yeah. So there is a character in the help, Skeeter. Okay. And Skeeter has a lot of anxiety. Skeeter, is very anxious person. Yeah, but Hermione Granger. You can take Hermione Granger in Harry Potter. So these kind of characters are therapeutic because they make me feel like I'm not alone in this. And there are a lot of people out there who are facing the same kind of struggles I am and the same kind of issues I am. And they are also trying to learn to improve themselves. So why can't I? So this is kind of
Yeah,
therapeutic.
for sure.
Yeah.
Like representation is so important. Like if you go through anything at all, right, and if you see someone like going through the same thing, you also get to learn from their story, the way they are handling things, the way maybe they dealt with a certain situation that you find familiar, or maybe you
That's
will
so
go through in
true.
the future or something. Like I have
Yeah.
this friend at work who watches this show called Suits as his holy Bible, and he will use it in all these situations that he comes across at work, because they show very relatable kind of things, and you can actually apply them and see results as well. So I am really glad that you
Oh,
found that
that's
representation, and I'm really
that's
glad that
actually me
I
with. I was going to say that's actually me with Big Bang Theory. So I'm always watching it. Like there's no time of the year when I'm not watching Big Bang Theory, especially if I'm feeling a bit down because watching these characters you can relate to, and dealing
Yeah.
with the same mental struggles as you are, it just makes you feel not alone, at least. And I think that's also a good feeling.
Yeah. And staying on the topic, like you guys mentioned a very good thing about TV shows. Like, watching not just watching the character that you relate to, but also watching your favorite show. Because in my opinion, a show becomes your favorite when you can relate to it, don't you think? Like when you see yourself in the characters and when you think that, like you share their personality or stuff. Like for me, it's like currently I'm watching Better Call Saul. Like, I don't know if either of you have watched it. And there's a character in it, Kim Wexler, and she like doesn't necessarily have anxiety, but the way she tries to control things and the way she tried to handle the trouble that Jimmy, like Saul Goodman, who's her boyfriend, the main protagonist of the show, like he gets into, and the way she's trying to support him and everything, I see myself in her, and I'm like, I feel seen, like this kind of thing. So this is also very helpful in my opinion in the struggles that I face.
Yeah, I really like that you can talk. I actually really like that I was also able to, contribute in some way. You mentioned, and I haven't seen Better Call Saul, but I'm sure like you know what you're
100%.
talking about, and I'm sure someone out there who's listening to this also knows what you're talking about.
Yeah, of course, it's like
Uh,
famous shows.
Yeah, for sure. So I wanted to discuss how managing anxiety can be tough on its own. But then, you had an added role of being a caregiver to your mom, right? And you said that your anxiety amplified right after your nanu's death, right? So I just wanted to ask actually that, how did this added role of being a caregiver to your mom, who, from what I understand, had an autoimmune disorder for maybe 2 years. Uh, how is that for you? And what were the challenges you faced in this new role, this new added role?
Yeah, so this was the part that I was dreading the most because it's the most difficult to talk about. But since I joined here for a reason, I will talk about it. For context, my mother had a nervous system disorder, which is called CIPD. It's actually a problem where your nerves get inflamed, like inflammation, and it can attack any part of the body. And my mother's legs were attacked, and because of that, she lost her ability to walk. Uh, and it happened like in 2021. It's like a disease that gradually grows worse, right? Like first she started stumbling, and then she started tripping. She was like she couldn't move her leg further. Then suddenly she needed support to walk, and then suddenly she just sat down completely. She was bedridden. So it grew worse over time, and like it's like being her caregiver suddenly. There are two kinds of things. Like before her death, we were always hopeful that she will get better because the doctors always told us that she just needs medication, and they kept prescribing her medications after medications, and there were a lot of tests that ruled her as CIPD. Because I'm like, she went through I think thousands of diagnoses before doctors finally pinpointed CIPD as the main problem, which caused her legs to be like this. So, there are two parts of this. So before her death, as a caregiver, of course, there were many, many challenges because seeing your able-bodied mother suddenly be bedridden, so more challenges to say, of course. And since I'm the eldest and I was literally her best friend, so this was kind of like, I'm so sorry, getting emotional. Okay.
No, of course, of course. Feel this is a safe space, and whatever you need, we're here for you, and take your time.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Like suddenly, like seeing her bedridden, like it was challenging, of course. But I always thought that if I was in her position, she will be taking care of me twice as much. You know, like the thing, it's enough. Like seeing your mother in this situation, it's never easy for anyone, especially for people like me. Yes, who were her best friend, who was your
Yeah,
her, the most important person in your life. seeing her suddenly like this, never easy, never easy.
Yeah, you're right.
And in my opinion, that was literally the most difficult part of my life, that seeing her like this. So when she died, so I was grateful. I was like, the kind of life she was living for the past 2 years, death was the best thing that could happen to her, because, of course, like since the Muslims, we believe that any person who suffers such illness, they go straight to heaven. They are, every kind of sin of theirs is cut. I don't know other people's beliefs, but that's what I believe in. And
Yeah.
honestly, religion has been a huge coping mechanism for me. And in my opinion, in my some of my darkest moments, turning to Allah and praying to Him has been, a very emotionally supportive moment for me, in my opinion. So
Yes,
yeah,
of course.
and the hope that that was given to me wasn't by people or anyone. Yeah, people were there for me all the time, 24/7, talk for catharsis or anything. But the main hope that was given to me was by praying to God and knowing that He's the one who brought my mother to this world, and He's the one who has taken her, and He's the one who is going to provide a much much better life to her in the afterlife, and she will ever live here. So yeah, so this kind of thing was like I was grateful that I took care of my mother, and because when parents grow old, so only then children get the opportunity to take care of them, like they once took care of you as kids, right? So
Yeah.
so like my mother was destined to die at this age, at this early age. So if her death was sudden, if my healthy mother suddenly died one day, or like she dropped dead, I think that would have been much much harder for me to handle. But since she was sick, and for 2 years we saw her in such a state, so me and all of my siblings and even my father, we were like after she died, we were grateful to God that at least God gave us the chance to take care of her, and to give back to her all the care that she had given us in her entire life, like after her marriage and after she had us. So yeah, so yeah,
Yeah,
that
for
was
sure. Like I remember her being the sweetest person. She would take such good care of me whenever I would come over, and she'd always be so hospitable. And even I met her a few times while she was sick as well. I have never seen her even as a person who was sick. I've never seen her not smiling. She was always smiling, always so positive, and I think that's just like so good. And I feel like she left such a good mark on the world. You know how we leave marks on the world. I feel like she definitely left a really good mark.
yeah. So this is what I believe, that the legacy that she left behind is imprinted on her children, like on us. And like my biggest goal is after her death is to be the person that she wanted me to be, and to grow into the kind of woman that she wanted me to grow up into. Like she couldn't see anything, she couldn't see her grandchildren, anything in the future that could have happened. But I believe like she's in a much, much better place. We are in the terrible one. Like we are in this temporary world that, growing worse every day, inflation, economy, Palestine and Israel wars and everything. In my opinion, World War III is also very near. Allah Ta'ala nahi karwaye, magar since like the the affairs that are happening around the world, it's very, very, it's giving telltale signs that World War III is very near. But Allah Rahim kare sabpe. But so my point is that we are in a terrible place. He is in a very, and every person that has died, our close ones, our loved ones, our family members, our friends, everyone who has died is in a much better place than we are. And I just like want to be the kind of person that who after she dies gets to meet her mother once, because my mother was heavenly, and I want to be heavenly as well, even if it's like it's hell to on earth to be heavenly. Quoting Taylor Swift.
How when my dadi was ill, I used to divide up responsibilities with my mother, and we would take care of my dadi together. So when I had to be somewhere, then my mom would cover for me. When my mom had to be somewhere, I would cover for her. We later, when it got really bad, then we actually did end up getting a nurse for her, like a full-time nurse. But until then, we had to divide up responsibilities and take care of her around the clock. Now, I know you have siblings, and I'm sure your siblings also divided up the responsibilities like that. But I really wanted to ask you about how you took care of yourself while you were taking care of your mom.
Well, honestly, like when my mother was sick, the only thought that revolved around my mind and the mind of my siblings and my father was her. Taking care of ourselves was always the last thing on our mind, and taking care of her was always the first thing. But if you wanna, like, of course, my anxiety was at peak when my mother was sick because, I like apart from social anxiety or general anxiety, the anxiety that I gained after my mother got sick was medical anxiety. I was like, the body is capable of getting so sick. Like my mother was a prime example that you can get bedridden. So medical anxiety was always, on peak when my mother was sick. But taking care of myself, like like I was going to work. My sisters were the one who were at home because they like took gap years for to take care of our mother because of course my mother needed 24/7 attendance and she wasn't comfortable with strangers at all and she got like this the more the sicker she got the more petty she became. So the pettier she became and she was getting very picky and she was getting very frustrated easily because of course she couldn't walk and she was growing weaker and weaker by day. And even though we tried to help her in any way we could, we admitted her to the hospital, we admitted her to the we got her inpatient admission, and we even got through blood drives and everything. We blood इनकी बहुत कमी आई थी अम्मी को, and हमने अपनी donations करवाई, हमारे रिश्तेदार they stepped up and everything. Yeah, so taking care of her was a prime example, but yeah, my prime priority. But taking care of myself at that time was like, um, I believe like going to work and spending some time away from the house, like where my sick mother was the way I had to how I took care of myself. Like in at work, there was work, of course, and responsibilities, deadlines, and my colleagues, who I won't call colleagues, they are my friends, and talking to them, laughing with them, and it's so that was kind of therapy for me, and that was the way I took care of myself. But the minute I got home, taking care of myself was always the last thing that I thought about, and taking care of my mother, attending to her needs, because the entire day my sisters were the one taking care of her. But after I got home from work, I was the one who took care of her. Because of course my brother, like my sisters and I were and my father were the only ones who could take care of my mother, intensely, like in every way, without shame or whatever. But my brother, like he took care of her by, in the way of bringing her things, bringing her medicine or and always like taking care of her priorities,
Yeah,
even though studying a very difficult field, difficult medical field, and his exams are always like 24/7 उसके exams ही होते रहते हैं. So even besides that, he always like, going out and रात रात में भी जाना 2 बजे 3 बजे कभी भी, like to give my brother a little appreciation here because he had he has his studies are very tough. But despite that, when my mother got admitted to the hospital, so he had to wake up at 6 a.m. from the house and pick up the blood bag from the blood bank for her. And he did that. And that also in freezing winter, like when it was, I think, January, in the early days of January. And he did that. Why? Because it was her mother. And taking care of ourselves, the fact that you could get hypothermia, or you could get frostbite, I'm so sorry, I'm exaggerating, we don't get frostbite actually. Getting sick from the cold or anything, that was never in our mind. Always in our mind was our mother and taking care of her and being her caregiver. That's it. So yeah, for your question, I took care of myself by spending some time away from the house, which I had to because I have work, and I couldn't like, of course, I couldn't resign or anything because of course that would have been much difficult because my mother's medical expenses had, really rocketed our budget, and I had to work to support my family, and I'm still doing it. Like even after my mother died, my mother always wanted to be, an independent woman. She was always like, तुम तुम इतना पढ़ रही हो, तुम इतना कर रही हो, तुम ऐसी फील्ड में शौक है that you love reading books and you love writing और सब कुछ, तुम बस काम करना है, okay? Always be independent, never rely on a man. And that's the kind of ideology I'm still following, and I will follow it. Because of course, my main goal is to be the woman that she wants me to be. So yeah, so this is how I like. This is the answer to your question.
yeah. I'm so glad that you are keeping your mom's memory alive by honoring the things that she once wanted you to do. And I'm actually so proud of you that you were able to, contribute to your family's expenditures during such a tough time. Matlab, like को पढ़ तो कोई भी लेता है, right? But to actually put that to use and actually, be able to be worthy enough to actually contribute to the house is like, a great thing, and it's something that you were able to do. So I'm really proud of you for that. I do also realize that, how sometimes when you spend a lot of time caregiving, spend a lot of time, caring for someone, the loss becomes even more impactful. You feel like a big part of your life just stood up and disappeared, and something that had used to devote a lot of your time to is now gone, right? So can you talk about your grief a bit, and like how was your experience of grieving after your mother's passing?
Okay, first of all, I wanted to talk about the point that you mentioned that like how her death would be more impactful because she took care of her 24/7. That is a very, very, that's very truthful because my sister Amara once when I mentioned, she was the one who took care of my mother the most. She was always the one who was cooking her soup because she couldn't eat proper solid food, and she was always the one cooking, and she was always the one feeding her and everything. And after her death, she was the one whose grieving process took the longest because she was always there with her. She was always taking care of. Even though in her like last days, my mother couldn't properly talk. Say it. She was like since her brain got affected. Now it was a nervous system disorder, and because of that, she only mumbled nonsense and rubbish words. But despite that, Amara like stayed by her side at some point, and of course, at most times we felt like our mother was becoming a burden because of course we had our own lives and everything, and we still had to take care of her. But those were only like those forbidden moments that we didn't like to think about. Those were that kind of moments where we thought our mother was a burden because of course she was never a burden, and Amara always thought that way. So when my mother died, like that's what I'm thinking कि Amara जो है कभी कभार उसको होता था कि बहुत हो रहा है यार मैं शी सो यंग शी इज अ टीनेजर एंड उसको ही सब कुछ करना पड़ रहा है एंड एवरीथिंग हर वक्त काम करना नो मोमेंट ऑफ रेस्ट नो मोमेंट ऑफ रेस्ट उसको ही होता था कि यार बर्डन हो रहा है मुझसे कोई और काम ले ले हबीबा इज माय अदर सिस्टर उसको काम दे दें या फिर कुछ इस तरह और वट एवर ऐसे हबीबा हैज इश्यूज ऑफ हर ओन और इस तरह तो उसको वो इतनी अमारा इज लाइक once again I want to appreciate my sister Amara. She is also very emotionally vulnerable like me, but she mashallah is very mature as well, and because of that maturity she took care of my mother 24/7. And she complained, of course she did, because of course once I said her age wasn't that her age isn't that that level where she has that kind of maturity to take care of a very sick person, but she did that and she felt the burden. But after my mother died, she was the one who cried the most, and whose sadness, who moved on in the like, who was the last one who moved on completely from that. So yeah, and for my own grieving process, like once again, what I'm saying is, of course, the shock was very much because we always lived in the delusion that our mother will get better. And now that I'm thinking about it, like seeing her state get worse every day, it was written that she will die. Okay, and in my opinion, dying was the best thing that happened to her in that state. Like getting better would have been a very, very long process and very, very painful process for my mother. And I didn't want her to go through all of that again. And but when like on the moment she died, it was very shocking because she was admitted to the ICU for 7 days, before her death. And those 7 days were physically and emotionally and mentally the worst time of my life. And I was going to work, and I always, since because of my anxiety, I was always asking my father, like, who was staying with my mother, okay, is she okay? Is she okay? What was the doctor saying? Updates. And my father, and like in the hospital, like my accompanying my mother was my father and Habiba and Ashad, like my brother. Habiba is the person who's like isn't afraid of hospitals or anything like that, and she's very strong minded. In my opinion, she's like a man in a girl's body. Like she's that brave, and mashallah, so I'm very proud of her.
I
So
would
these
agree
three people
also.
were, yeah. So these three people were accompanying my mother, and me, Amara, and my youngest sister, Roman, we all were always badgering them and questions, कि, Ammi, ab kaisi, doctor ne kya bola, is she getting better? And they had to feed us lies. My father and my brother and everyone, even my sister Abiba, they had to feed us lies, कि, yeah, she's getting better, kidney में थोड़ा infection आ गया, और ये सब चीजें हैं. Because, of course, and especially my dad was the most worried about me, because he knows I have anxiety, and he knows कि, Kulsum को कुछ ना हो जाए, because my mother, to my family members, she always said, like in her sixth grade, कि अगर मुझे कुछ हो जाता है तो प्लीज सबसे ज्यादा कुसुम का ख्याल रखना, because she knew about my anxiety, she knew how tense I could get, and she knew my panic attacks and everything. Like, even though, like, she was the kind of person जो कि थोड़ा इस बातों पे इतना वो नहीं करती थी. वो कहती थी कि क्या कहते हैं, नमाज पढ़ लिया करो, नमाज पढ़ो, अल्लाह ताला को याद करो, तुम लोग सही हो जाओगे. पर उसके बावजूद she knew कि कुसुम को कुछ ना हो जाए, अगर if something happened to me. So she said कि to my father especially, कुसुम का ख्याल रखेगा. So because of that, my father kept feeding me lies. क्योंकि I was at work and कहीं मुझे panic attack हो जाता था इस बार, तो क्या होता. So he kept feeding me lies कि yeah, she's getting better, infection है, and the doctor is coming, और इस तरह की चीजें. So
Yeah, I can relate with you completely. Like even my grandmother, she was also at the ICU for 7 days, and matlab, it felt very wrong to, at the end of it all, it felt very wrong to feel that, oh, it's she's in a better place and I'm glad she died, because that's such a weird thing to say and also admit to yourself that I'm glad she died. That's such a weird thing, right? Matlab, this is such an important person to you, why are you glad? And this is like this huge, there's a lot of like internal struggle accepting it. But you're absolutely right, because I remember my dadi actually did end up coming back from the hospital after her 7 days at the ICU, but during the night she had a brain stroke. And after a brain stroke, basically a person is just a vegetable. Your brain is completely, I don't know if it's a wrong thing to say, but your brain is completely fried, and you're not able to react to things. Even your eye movements are very methodological, and like they're not like, you're not looking at anything directly. They're always like they're moving in this same linear pattern over and over and over, and you don't even know
yeah,
if that person can hear you. It's just a very painful thing, and I felt like you know, after like even when she came back from the ICU and she was, she was matlab, to us and to the doctors and everyone else, she was okay enough to live at home and everything. Even then, she was covered up with bruises completely all over her body. Her hands and arms, her arms and like her legs, they were swollen because of all the, the infections she had had, the type of heavy antibiotics she had been given to cure them, and all of that. And she had bruises because of, like they would always be trying to find a new way to insert a needle into her, because old people, their vessels, they tend to dry up after like continued use of like maybe one spot only. So it was just a very difficult time for us. It was also very difficult to see her like this. And after that all, the thought did cross my mind that okay, like I'm actually glad that she passed away, because it would have been very difficult to see her, like see her live on as a person with a brain
yeah,
stroke. She even herself, she used to say ke, uh, she kept saying Allah, Allah, and like she kept saying Allah. And first, for the first few, like the first few hours that she went into, like like before the stroke, she kept saying Allah, Allah, but I didn't we all of us didn't know what she was saying. Like she was just mumbling to herself, and the only thing we could understand was Allah. So we asked her like, what are you saying? Like, so she told me that I'm saying Allah Taala bas मेरी अजियत खत्म कर दे and मुझे अपने पास बुला ले. So that just shook me to the core. And after that, the same night she told this to me, the same night was the day that she got her stroke and she passed away within a few hours. I was lucky enough to see her in her last hours. I rushed from my office straight to the hospital, and I was there. I was actually holding her hand when when her heart stopped beating, and the monitors went like, like static. So I was there, but it's just
Yeah, your dad was an
yeah, it's
amazing
just like
person. Like I always remember, like whenever I visited your house, she was always there, and she gave such a, like the kind of sweet vibe that old people give. She was always there and
hmm.
always mentioning to say, "It's amazing, man. Amazing woman."
Yeah, so I know that having friends like you were a really good way to cope for me, who were constantly there for me and were there to validate the way I was feeling. So, what were ways that you found to cope?
Yeah, so like what she's saying is कि like यहाँ पे कि I don't want to see my mother या फिर my grandmother या फिर whatever whoever loved one is in the ICU that way. So my I already mentioned my brother Ashrad and my sister Habiba were the ones who were with my mother in the ICU, and they saw the state she was in, and since because of that, like after her death, their grieving processes were the fastest. They were the one who accepted her death the fastest because they saw the state my mother was in. I never saw it. Like I was very scared and I wasn't like brave enough to see it because I knew I would either fall unconscious or I would, I think I would like have gone to the afterlife myself. But because they saw her in a state like that, they accepted her death because they were like, our mother was in a very horrible state. And dying was the thing, God, like, bringing her back to her own natural, like, their own original realm was the best thing that could ever happen to her. And that's why they accepted her death the fastest. But for me, like, yeah, seeing her in a very, saragi place or something, it was like, of course, I accepted her death as well. But beach back because since she was the most important person in my life, like besides my dad, she is still the most important person in my life. So processing her death was very difficult, especially for the first 2 months. It was very difficult. I took on, entire week off from work, and of course my manager and everyone understood and everything. But like even with the day offs and everything, I felt like I was living kind of void. Like life didn't matter anymore. Anyone in my family or anyone close to me can drop dead tomorrow. Like there was this sense of mortality that was shattered once again. Like it was first shattered when Nanu died, but it was shattered even more intensity after my mother died. So I was completely barren from the inside. Whatever personality made me was completely gone. Okay, especially for like the first 2 weeks after her death. And since there were a lot of responsibilities suddenly handed to me after she died, like every person that was acquainted with my mother coming to me, giving me pursa or बोल रहे हैं कि Kulsum तुम बड़ी हो and you have to take care of your siblings, you have to take care of your father. So coping with all of these things, especially since I'm an introvert and I always hid behind my mother whenever I was in public gatherings or banana season, like weddings, whatever. But like now people who came to my mother, they now would come to me for the same kind of things, like greetings or whatever, as social acquaintances and everything, emotional connections or anything. So at her funeral, like I had to cope with all of these things. So I had very little time to, focus on my own grieving process. So, but when the funeral finished and everyone went away and the house was very empty. Like even though all six of us are here, my father and my siblings, but my mother was the home minister of our house, and she was the main pillar. So after she died, my grieving process was very difficult. Once again, I'm saying. But once again, my grieving process, I was like, anxiety was at peak. एक तो first thing, and secondly, there was this huge void that grew larger day by day, and I felt like nothing in the world mattered anymore. I got into a a straight state of depression. Like, that's what I say. I've never felt depression. I am generally a very positive person, and you know that, Raja. Agar I am anxious, I know panic attacks or whatever, but I am generally a very positive person. Allah ka shukar hai, I've never felt any depression in my life. Depression and anxiety are not synonymous, and anyone who thinks had needs to do more research. So, but when my mother died, like there's 5 stages of grief, and one of them is depression. So, in my opinion, I skipped the state of anger and I went straight to depression and stayed there the longest. For these first 2 weeks, I stayed in that state. I lost all kinds of colors that made me, that made me unique. And I lost all kinds of passion. I lost all kinds of interest. I was just like there, existing in life and missing her talk. And for some reason, like since like the recent most part of my mother that I witnessed was the sick one. But after she died, my brain kept recalling the healthy mother, the mother who was, was there for me majority of my life. The memories and her voice and everything that she told me, and praying that she comes into my dreams and all of these things. So yeah, so this was part of my grieving process and remembering her like this. But and but after a week ended and I had to go back to work because of course life doesn't stop after someone dies. So I go back to work, and since I'm already very social anxious, I was like, I got afraid of receiving people's pity and receiving people's sympathetic eyes, because of course people see felt for me, and because it was such a huge loss and everything. But I was kind of afraid of these kind of things because I was like, what if like this they will see me as this strange creature के साथ इतना बड़ा हादसा हुआ है, इतनी बड़ी ट्रेजेडी हुई है और ये सब चीजें हैं, एंड लाइक क्या कहते हैं, ये इम्प्रेशन बन जाएगा उनके लिए मेरे पास ही, लाइक इस तरह की थॉट्स आने लगी थी. So yeah, so my grieving process was a part of all of these kind of things, but Allah ka shukar hai, the biggest thing that consoled me was the words of my siblings and my siblings support and everything. Like seeing my younger siblings accept her death and scold me whenever I started crying or whatever. Like whenever I showed how weak I am being or whatever, like how broken I am from the inside. My sister Habiba was always the one to shut me up and say, "कि Afi, Ammi is in a much better place and ये रोने धोने से कोई फायदा नहीं होगा. अगर तुम्हें उनको कुछ पहुंचाना है, you have to do something good for her, then pray. Pray Surah Yasin or stuff." And that, made me accept her death faster. It's like support from my family and especially my father. I was like, चलो मेरी mother तो चली गई, ठीक है, but my father is still there. And अल्लाह का शुक्र है. Um, तो कुछ वो लोगों के साथ स्पेशली डॉटर्स के साथ ये होता है कि उनके लिए इमोशनल सपोर्ट उनकी मदर होती है. बट फॉर मी बोथ माई पेरेंट्स वर माई बेस्ट फ्रेंड. सो इफ आई लाइक से कि मेरी मदर चली गई, मेरा सब कुछ चला गया, दैट्स नॉट ट्रू बिकॉज माई फादर इज राइट देयर एंड ही इज माई बेस्ट फ्रेंड. सो या, so grieving process is phenomenal except here because I was like, I still have responsibilities and I have people I have to take care of and it's not easy. So I need to accept this and I need to move on because that's what my mother would want from me. So yeah, this is how I coped with her loss. Like it was very difficult and it is still very difficult. Like देखो, like कितने महीने गुजर गए and I'm breaking into pieces and stuff. So yeah, so, I'm just like
Yeah,
hanging on by.
yeah, you're right. Grieving, I think, is a process that never stops, and it never should stop because at the end of the day, you it shows that the person who you lost had a big impact on your life and was a very important person to you, and is a person worth remembering from time to time. I especially do relate with what you said about the dreams and wanting to see at least the person in the dreams again. And we have this cool little tradition in our house that whenever we see either of our grandparents, or when my dad sees his parents in his dreams, we would sit and at the breakfast table or whatever, we would always share, oh, I had this dream and like I saw this and I saw that, वो ऐसे बैठे हुए थे और इस तरह के कपड़े पहने हुए थे और ये कर रहे थे. And these are things that, yeah, and these are things that really help us honor and remember the people that we've lost. So what are ways that you honor and remember your mother in your daily life?
First of all, एक dreams वाली चीज है. Yeah, this is very true. Like जब भी whenever we see our mother, तो फिर we are always jumping and in anticipation कि जल्दी से morning आए and everyone wakes up ताकि we can share our dream with everyone. Like we saw our mother in a very beautiful state. Like my सबसे ज्यादा dreams में अभी तक अमारा के ख्वाब में मम्मी सबसे ज्यादा आई है. Like she looks, Amara always said that she looked very beautiful. She was wearing an amazing white dress or something. She was glowing, like, and she was very healthy and she was walking. So very चीज ये है. So क्या कहते हैं, तो yeah, memory, like honoring her and her everything, memories and everything. So we sometimes talk about her and we क्या कहते हैं, and honoring her memory is like doing whatever she taught us to do. Like I like अभी जब बकरीद आई थी, there's my thing in my work के ईद पे ना छुट्टियां मुश्किल से मिलती हैं आपको, since we are like connected to an international clientele, so we cannot like take holidays easily on Muslim कहते हैं calendar में होती हैं. So but on this Bakra Eid I insisted that I take all 3 days off, because in our household there's always a tradition of my mother, that my mother started, that she will make chapli kebab, ठीक है, on our Bakra Eid. So after her death, I was like, मुझे तीनों दिन off चाहिए, because I want to continue my mother's tradition and I want to be the one to take her place up. So I made chapti kebab on the second day and they turned out good. शुक्र है तारा का. Even though I cooked chapli kebab for the first time without her supervision, because I always did under her supervision. So yeah, honoring her memory we do that by following whatever she taught us, and the traditions that she followed, and the values that she had, and the worth that she put in us, and these kind of things were always the ones that. And another thing is that I also do the things my mother loved to do, but which necessarily I don't love to do, but I do them because my mother loved to do them. Like for example, she loved to shop. ठीक है, she was, जैसे होती हैं women, they love clothes and they love shopping and they're going out or सब कुछ. She loves that. She was a huge extrovert. She was everything I'm not, in social gatherings. So तो क्या है कि after she died, so I was like, I had to buy clothes for myself, and I went out and I was like कि मुझे वो कपड़े लेने हैं जो मुझे लगता है मम्मा को अच्छे लगते हैं. Like if I showed her and she would have been like, कुलसुम बहुत अच्छी choice or सब कुछ. So yeah, so I did that. And the first time shopping without her was very difficult, because I always went out with her. Like I always gave her the reins and I always made her choose, because once again, I was never interested in clothes. I was more interested in reading and books and so on. So I forced myself to do this. I was like, nahi, ab mama nahi hai, but I need to do the things that she loved to do and she wanted me to do. And so this is how I honored her memory, and this is how I'm still honoring it. Inshallah, bas dua hai yahi ki life mein I fulfill all the expectations that she had on me.
Um, Actually, it's very good that you found so many ways to honor her memory, and also actually really great that you still follow, like all of you and your siblings are following the values and the traditions she instilled, in your house. Um, I want to ask one question, and it's that what what advice would you give to our listeners who might be going through similar experiences themselves?
Oh, thank you for asking me the question. People in my life say I give the best advice. So this since I went this through this kind of thing, the first thing that I want to say that it's okay if you think that people around you cannot understand what you're going through, because you know the loss of a parent is a huge loss, and not everyone can, especially people who haven't faced such losses themselves. They can never understand you and the emotions that you're going through and the turmoil that you're going through. Only people who have similar experiences, or your siblings or your father or your mother, or whoever your living parent is, and people who have the same kind of loss, only they can understand, and it's okay to feel that way. So your first advice is this, because when my mother died, I was like, I got this strange kind of jealousy with my friends whenever they talk about like office mein jab bhi lunch hota whatever, to like अगर if my colleagues are listening to this, I'm sorry. ये emotions अब मेरे नहीं हैं, ये उस वक्त है. So whenever like that they talk about their mother कि ये मम्मा ने बनाया है, and उनके बहुत मशहूर हैं और सना और ये सब कहते हैं, हम तारीफ करते हैं कि wow, your mother is such a good cook और सब कुछ. I always felt a bit of jealousy, like wow यार, she still has her mother and I haven't. I don't have her anymore. So this jealousy and this, what can I say, this resentment against people who still have that kind of connection because their mother is alive and well, and Allah Taala sabki mothers ko bahut lambi zindagi de inshallah Swami, and my fathers ko bhi, parents ko healthy life de inshallah Taala. But I was like and whenever they like people give support to me, I was like, what do they understand? They don't understand the tragedy and the sadness and the depression that I'm going through because of a parent's loss. And I couldn't achieve the kind of catharsis with these kind of people, even if they're like very heartfelt, and I love the support they're giving me and the attention they're giving me. But whatever, at the end of the day, I was like, what do they understand? Like, they're trying to be there for me, they're trying to be, people who I can talk to when I'm sad or whatever. But on the, like, they can't give me honest to God advice because they haven't faced the same kind of loss, right? So yeah, my advice to your listeners who are going through the same kind of loss is okay to feel that way. If you feel this, like, people who are giving support to you who haven't faced the similar kind of loss, and you feel resentment towards them, it's okay to feel that way. You're not in the wrong in any way, because this kind of loss is not something, it's not a small deal, it's a huge deal. So, and to give you an example, kya kehte hain, like, people who around me, like, who haven't faced a similar loss, अब मैं उनसे बातें करती थी, I was like, let out my feelings, talk to them, and they were always good listeners, and I'm very grateful for such people in my life. But people who had faced loss, like if their dad had died years before because of a sickness, if it was their mother, and they listened to me, and they gave me advice that I really, found impactful, because they went through the same kind of thing, and they also faced the same kind of grieving process that I was facing. And in my opinion, this grieving process is very good, because try to find people in your life, like, that face similar kind of loss that you did. um, Always listen to them, because they also face the same grieving process, and they have survived it. So you can too. Like, you are not the only one. Like, when my mother died, I was like, main kyun hu itni unfortunate? Why am I the one who lost her best friend? Like, why me, but when I talk to these people who lost their parent, या फिर who lost their kid, या फिर who lost their sister, या फिर brother, Allah Taala सबकी मग़फ़िरत फरमाए. um I was like, I'm not the only one. इन लोगों के साथ भी tragedies हो चुकी हैं. ये लोग भी बेचारे, कि इन्होंने क्या deserve किया था कि इनको इस तरह की loss कर जाए, कि so God has, faced, put people into a lot more trouble than I'm putting. At least I have a very loving family who is there to support me. Like, I, like this person I've been talking to, she also lost her mother, but she doesn't have that kind of support that I have. So I was like, if at least I'm in a much better place than most of people, and I want the best for them too. Like, they deserve that kind of support that I'm receiving from people around me. So yeah, so my advice is that it's okay to feel this way. It's okay to feel this kind of resentment against people who haven't faced the similar loss. And for the grieving process, you know देखो, deaths are always different. ठीक है? Some people die from sickness, some people die from heart attacks, some people die for no reason at all, and they just dropped it. They were healthy one minute and then they die. So, in my opinion, grieving processes differ as per the cause of death. Like, my mother was sick, and my grieving process was, it inched towards acceptance, because I saw her in a very horrible state that I wouldn't wish on her in a million years, because she was the most important person in my life. But if your mother, for example, died suddenly, so your grieving process would be different. Your grieving process would be very, very long. You wouldn't understand what's going on. You will try to, like, I'm giving a trigger warning. You would like to commit suicide. Therefore, you wouldn't find any kind of happiness in this world anymore. And people will say, "Kya tumhari color kho gaya? You've become gray and dull and lifeless." Once again, I'm saying it's okay to feel this way, because एक loss, parent ka loss, it's not that easy to cope with, especially if they die suddenly. So, my advice is ke hold on, things will get better, because once again, time stops for no one. It is a very cruel thing to believe, but even if, like, you feel the world has stopped moving, the world hasn't stopped moving. It is still revolving. The plants are still doing their job, the sky is still moving, and the earth is still rotating, and life is still moving on, and you need to move on as well. So yeah, so this is the advice that I want to give your listeners.
I think yeah, I think you put it very eloquently. And you also talked about how our friends and our colleagues are maybe trying to help, but it doesn't, to us it doesn't seem like they're actually helping, or the help doesn't have as impact as someone who has actually been through same experiences. So I wanted to ask this question: what kind of advice would you give to people who wants to support someone who is grieving for a loved one's loss?
Yeah, this is an excellent question because this is the kind of advice that I've also given my friends because they've asked for it. Like they were like, "Kulsum, हम कैसे support कर सकते हैं तुम्हें? तो तुम मुझे बताओ." Like people who haven't faced a similar kind of loss. So yeah, so this is also the advice I would give to you. I'm sorry about the background noise. Okay, so the advice that I want to give to those kind of people is always listen. Okay, don't try to say कि you will get better या फिर these thing will happen and कोई बात नहीं हो जाता है and most of all do not ever say कि I don't know what's happening tires फट रहे हैं I have no idea so do not ever say कि अगर ये होता तो शायद तुम्हारी मम्मा या फिर कोई भी ठीक हो जाता never say that never put them in any kind of guilt about the loss because I'm telling you that's the worst thing a person who has faced such a loss can feel guilt like मैं अगर ये करती तो I could have saved my mother अगर मैं इस तरह करती तो I could have saved my brother ये कुछ भी चीज हो सकती है so putting them in guilt is the last thing that you should be doing but so I think the advice that people need to listen to is that for your friend yeah, for your relative yeah, whoever that person is who faced such a loss always be there to listen to them okay listen to them rant always give them stay let them stay in their comfort zone if they're not comfortable sharing things with you if they're not comfortable talking if they just want to be alone let them be alone okay just keep reminding them that you are there for them that you are there to support them to listen to them okay giving them advice is what I would advise you against because once again what I'm saying is people who have faced such a loss they only feel catharsis with other people who have faced similar kind of losses so if you haven't faced a similar loss you should don't give advice don't be like कि she's in a much better place फिर इस तरह की चीजें हैं या फिर क्या कहते हैं yeah, she's much better living off in that afterlife और इस तरह की चीजें just sit and listen to them right that's it and if they start crying give them a comfort shoulder say क्या कहते हैं give them soothing words give them like I'm here to listen to you I'm here to cry with you if you want but just be there for them that's it and once again if they want to be alone let them be alone because being alone is a very huge therapeutic therapy for a lot of people it was for me like be spending some alone time some solitude was what I needed to accelerate my grieving process so yeah so that's my advice.
So I think we're closing this on a very high note, and I'm really happy about the conversation we had today. And I'm actually really glad that you had the courage to open up to us about it, no matter how difficult it was for you. Because I feel like even if this impacts one person out there, one listener out there listens to this and actually finds a way to grieve, someone feels seen in any way, I think we would have, and I feel you would also feel this that you would have fulfilled your mission for the whole. So
Yeah,
I'm really proud
exactly.
of you.
Like, yeah, thank you so much. Like talking about this on your podcast, it was also, very a huge kind of catharsis for me because I really like talking out about it out loud. Yet it yes, it makes it more, real. Like yeah, it happened to me. Like it has been a couple of months, not a couple of months, she died in February. But I didn't like avoided talking about it out loud. But now that I'm like I've got the courage and the bravery and the determination to talk about it in your podcast, I'm feeling, otherwise. I'm like, I'm talking about this, so that means like I can do this. I can, go on living life with this tragedy in my heart, and I can, be in a state of acceptance, and I can like, of course, it will like be a part of my existence. It will be a bane of my existence, but I can live with it. That's what I'm saying. Like I can cope with it. So yeah. So thank you for inviting me to your podcast, and I'm very glad and thrilled I got to talk to you too, and be in your podcast as a guest.
Thank you so much, Kulsoom. Thank you so much, Ume. That's so weird to call you Kulsoom.
Very
But
good.
Thank you so much, Umme, for coming to the podcast.
I think I'm actually very glad we talked to her because and again she's very eloquent and also she talked about so many things and I think people going through similar situations are going to relate with her a lot.
Yeah, you're right. And I feel like her situation is also very unique. So, you know how people pass away in their lives, but to take care of them for years and then have them pass away, and that too your mother, is just a very life changing type of thing, type of event to
True.
happen. And I feel like seeing her go through it all and come through on the other side unscathed and also like back up on her feet again, but still honoring her mom, honoring the people that she's lost in her life. It just gives me a lot of faith for myself, gives me a lot of inspiration, and I feel like it would also give a lot of inspiration to the people who are listening to us. So I'm really glad that we had her on our podcast and that she was brave enough to share her message across through this platform.
Thank you everyone for tuning in today and listening to this conversation and we will see you in the next episode.